So, you've got a presentation coming up and you're ready to rock it. But wait, before you even open a new file, make sure you're setting yourself up for success by planning the most important aspect, accessibility. Today, we're sharing strategies for making your presentation accessible. Hi, I'm Ariel with Unexpected Virtual Tours and Training. We host radically creative team building events for remote and hybrid teams. Today, I'm going to share with you some key tips for making your presentation accessible. All right, I know. Sometimes accessibility, it can feel like a buzzword. Why should you even pay attention to it? Well, it's simple. Accessibility benefits everyone. While you may have heard the term used primarily in the context of conversations about disability, while accessibility is really all about making sure that information or activities are usable and meaningful for as many people as possible. You might also be thinking, wow, that sounds great, but don't I have enough on my plate already? Why add extra work? Yeah, we get it. If you're not used to thinking about accessibility, it can seem like a big ask to change up how you do things. But even small changes can make a big impact, and it only gets easier from here. Plus, if making a few small changes to increase accessibility feels like a hassle to you, remember, it's a much bigger hassle for members of your audience to be prevented from engaging with your presentation. But you know what? Don't stress about it. When we plan with accessibility in mind from the outset, we create presentations that are clear, engaging, and usable for a wide range of audience members. So exactly how do you do that? Let's talk strategy. When designing an accessible presentation, it can sometimes be helpful to have information about specific needs and disabilities for your audience members. But the good news, you don't really need it. When planning your presentation, follow the principles of universal design for learning. Originally developed by the Center for Applied Special Technology, Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, is based on the idea that there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Everyone learns differently, so we should design experiences to match those needs. UDL values usable, accessible, and inclusive design. Framing your presentation plans around UDL also lets you get creative. Planning for accessibility in a presentation means planning ahead of time for a full range of potential barriers. This includes considering all the ways people might view, hear, and navigate your content. So think beyond just delivering information and ask, how can I use multiple modes of communication to maximize the possibilities for engagement? How can we design presentations that meet the needs of as many people as possible? Here are a few different ways you can think about different elements of your presentation. First, let's talk about your slide deck and your visuals. We often take for granted that people can see the illustrations we include. An audience member might be blind or low vision. They might have a migraine or are avoiding looking at screens, or they might be stuck at the very back of a crowded room. Keep your charts and graphs simple, but also anytime you include any kind of image that adds information, be sure to offer a brief verbal description, just a short phrase or sentence that tells someone who can't see your slides what it is that you're showing. For instance, we have an image of an eye test on screen. It can also be a good idea, too, to share a link to an access copy of your presentation, something people can find via QR code or URL. This lets people pull your materials up on their own devices. So if they need to enlarge something or use a screen reader app to read text aloud, they're free to do that. Regardless, sometimes presentation materials get shared virtually, whether you post them on a website or email them to people who had to miss your talk. For that reason, be sure to include alt text for any image, which is basically the digital version of a verbal image description. Every presentation design platform, including PowerPoint, Canva, and Google Slides, they all have this setting that allows you to add alt text. Next, let's think about your slide design and theme, starting with contrast. Did you know more than 300 million people worldwide are estimated to have some form of color blindness? That's a lot of people who could be in your audience. Use dark text on a light background or vice versa. This creates a strong visual contrast, so the words and the background don't blend together. And try to avoid combinations of red and green. This is also an important tip for photos and graphics. If the image you use has a lot of similar looking colors, it can be much harder to see. That means that instead of listening to what you're saying, your audience might be spending more time trying to decipher your slides. So let's keep everyone on the same page. Speaking of designing that page, be sure to keep it simple. Streamlining the text and images on your slides can keep people from being distracted or confused by what's on the screen and focused on the main messaging of your presentation. Rather than cramming in lots of text or images, simplified design generally means having bigger, easier to read fonts, better contrast, and clear organization. If you do include text on your slide, be sure to read that aloud, rather than asking your audience to read it themselves. This helps people with visual impairments, learning disorders, sensory processing issues, as well as that one colleague who chose your big moment to check their phone. One other big accessibility measure when it comes to visual cues: subtitles and captions. Now, you might think that captions are only for deaf people, but captions are beneficial for many people. Think about people who are attending your presentation in noisy environments, like logging in from a busy cafe or loud office where they have a lot of competition for your audio. Including captions means that your audience won't miss any important details. Plus, let's not forget about people who speak a different language or are learning a new language. Captions give them an enhanced chance at understanding your message. If you include audio or video in your presentation, always add subtitles or captions, and definitely don't rely on Zoom or Teams audio captioning to do them accurately in the moment. Whether your presentation is live or pre-recorded, delivery is key. Consider factors like pacing, clear language, and auditory aids. For instance, when you're speaking, you have so many more tools at your disposal than you would when you're writing a report. Consider the use of auditory cues, such as bang sound effects, or varying the tone or sound of your voice in order to emphasize important information. Also, try to avoid jargon, technical terms, or overly complex vocabulary that wouldn't be familiar to your audience. Remember, too, that some people process information differently than others. Try to speak at a steady pace, be clear and emphatic about your most important points, and include lots of visual and verbal signposting to help your audience stay on track of where you're going and where you've been with your presentation. In some professions and for some audience, it may even be appropriate to pause in between sections to allow for questions. Remember how I said that accessibility isn't just about how people interact with information, but also how they engage with activities? Accessible presentations aren't just about thoughtful text and slide designs. We also need to think about the event of the presentation itself. When speaking in an in-person setting, always use the microphone. No matter how many people raise their hands when you ask, "Can everyone hear me?" Remember, the person who can't hear you ask that can't raise their hand. So try to lobby for holding your presentation in rooms that have furniture that's easy to reconfigure for different needs, including tables and speaking podiums that are at appropriate heights for wheelchair users. Try to be proactive when it comes to other aspects of your presentation too. Event invitations should be clear and available in multiple formats to accommodate different needs, and they should mention any accessibility features you're planned for. Knowing ahead of time whether sign language interpreters are available or whether a room is accessible only by elevator can make a big difference in someone's ability to enjoy your event and even whether they decide to attend in the first place. And of course, any virtual platform you use should support accessibility features, such as screen readers, adjustable text sizes, and closed captioning. Sometimes people think we only need to plan for accessibility when we know a person with a disability will be in the audience, or they view it as something that can be added later. However, accessibility should never be an afterthought. It's not just about accommodating a specific group, it's about creating inclusive, thoughtful experiences that benefit everyone, and making sure your idea and your hard work really gets the attention and engagement they deserve. Those are just a handful of our favorite tips, but we've included links to plenty more resources and guidance there in the comments below. They'll help you continue your learning. Now remember, if you're not sure whether your accessibility choices are making the right impact, you can always ask. Accessibility is always a team effort, and part of the point of making good accessibility choices is so that no one has to go it alone. For even more best practices and tips for virtual learning, be sure to check out our free resources at unexpectedvirtualtours.com.